We saw in an earlier video that SaaS companies have very high gross margins. Most SaaS companies have a gross margin of at least 70% and some even have more than 90%. In this video, I will discuss why that is. Gross margin is a simple concept. It is the amount left over after deducting only direct costs from a company's revenue. Direct costs are costs that are directly linked to generating revenue. For example, if a company sells a widget to generate revenue, all the material costs, labor costs, fuel and electricity costs directly necessary to make the widget would be direct costs. Whereas administrative costs, branding, R&D expenses, etc. that are not directly necessary to make the widget would be indirect costs. What I want you to appreciate here is that gross margins of 70 to 90% are incredibly rare. Very few companies in other industries anywhere in the world have comparable gross margins. Most companies in the world operate at less than 40% gross margin. So, what do you think? Why would SaaS companies have such incredible gross margins? We saw in the earlier video that SaaS companies have much higher gross margins than IT consulting companies. Here's that data again. IT consulting companies here average around 30% gross margins, while SaaS companies here average around 76% gross margins. To round out the picture, here's gross margin data from a completely unrelated industry, tire manufacturers. These seem to be doing even worse and average only around 28% gross margins here. So, what's different about SaaS? Why does SaaS have such high gross margins, but IT consulting and tire manufacturers don't? The first answer I usually hear from my MBA class at IIM Bangalore is that SaaS has very low direct costs because it is a software product. Only servers, tech support, and customer support employees are necessary to generate revenue. All other costs are indirect, which leads to high gross margins. But direct costs in SaaS appear to be low only in comparison to the high price that SaaS companies are able to charge. What if a SaaS company was forced to halve its price? Obviously, its gross margin would reduce significantly. So high price is the key here, not really low direct costs. Consider this. Suppose you are selling a SaaS product to a large customer. The customer argues that your SaaS is just some workflow features built on top of cloud compute and storage. And so, you should only charge for server and support costs plus maybe a 10 to 15% markup and not more. Would you consider the customer's point of view to be reasonable? Well, the product has already been built anyway. Any fixed costs incurred in building the product are already sunk. So why should the customer pay anything more than server and support costs plus a markup? In fact, this is how many industries procure things, especially government and military. This is called cost plus pricing. So why not have cost plus pricing for SaaS? What would your answer be if a customer argued this? Because if you agreed with the customer, then your gross margin would reduce to the markup that you would be able to charge over cost. Then your gross margin will not be 70 to 90%. It may be even worse than the tire manufacturers here. So, what would your answer be to the customer? Most students in my class answer that they would argue from a benefit perspective. That is, if your SaaS generates X dollars in incremental bottom line for the customer, you are only being fair in charging a proportion of that X, and that has nothing to do with the cost that you incur. In other words, you will try to de-link your price and your cost, and you will try to link your price to the customer's benefit. This strategy has a name. It's called value-based pricing, and it is very common in SaaS. Here is Slack doing it. Slack links its price to the number of active users because that is a good enough proxy of customer benefit in their case. Here is SendGrid, an email marketing software doing value-based pricing. SendGrid links its price to the number of contacts stored and the number of emails sent, because that is a good enough proxy of benefit in their case. Here is Cheddar, a subscription billing SaaS company, going even further with value-based pricing. Cheddar charges small businesses a fixed price per month plus 30 cents for every transaction in their builder plan. For large businesses, they charge a larger fixed amount plus 0.5% of revenue. Think about it. Large businesses pay Cheddar a portion of their revenue for using their software. So, it is this delinking of price and cost which is at the heart of why SaaS has such high gross margins. But then, why don't tire manufacturers have value-based pricing? Also, what is the value of a tire? Can you have a car today without tires? Of course not. A tire is essential to the car. It is indispensable. Then why don't tire manufacturers have value-based pricing? They should be able to lay a claim to the entire value of the car, because you can't really have a car without tires. On the other hand, CRM software may bring incremental revenue for a customer, but it is in no way indispensable. Businesses can definitely operate without CRM software. So why can a SaaS product, which is not essential, have value-based pricing, high gross margins, and even lay a claim to a portion of the customer's revenue like Cheddar, but a tire manufacturer, which makes something essential and indispensable, cannot have value-based pricing and must suffer low gross margins? Isn't it strange? If you are thinking that this is a strategic blunder and the leaders at tire manufacturers are universally making a mistake by not having value-based pricing, you are wrong. If you are thinking that this is because tire manufacturers are somehow altruistic and not as cutthroat as SaaS companies, you're again wrong. Tire manufacturers would also love to claim a portion of the car maker's revenue if they could get away with it. But they can't, and SaaS companies like Cheddar can. But why? It's a simple answer. Defensibility. Defensibility leads to high gross margins. SaaS is highly defensible. We discussed why in our previous video. If you haven't seen it, tap on the banner at the top right corner. Tire manufacturers do not have the defensibility of SaaS businesses, so they can't have differentiated products. If a tire manufacturer tries to differentiate and bring in a new meaningful innovation, its competitors copy it rapidly. There are few network effects in the tire business compared to SaaS. So, competitors in the tire business compete primarily on price. This links the price of a tire to the cost of a tire and delinks it from the benefit that a tire provides. This is the definition of a commodity business operating in perfect competition. This is not true just for tires. In any business, if you do not have defensibility, competition will copy any meaningful innovation you make, so your product will not remain differentiated. No defensibility means no differentiation. And without differentiation, competition will put pressure on your price. So your price will get linked to your cost and will be delinked from the benefit you provide to your customers. In other words, without defensibility, your product will be commoditized. It will become a commodity. It will not remain unique or differentiated. On the other hand, if your business has defensibility, your price will be linked to the benefit you provide and will be delinked from your cost. This is what leads to the high gross margins that SaaS has. I call this the iron law of gross margins. If you are in perfect competition, the price you can charge will get linked to your cost. And if you have defensibility, the price you can charge will get linked to the benefit you provide to your customer. Therefore, gross margin is a feature of a business, not a choice. A sustained high gross margin indicates that a business has defensibility and is not in perfect competition. But you should know that most businesses in the world are commodity businesses operating in perfect competition. Therefore, they cannot truly charge you for the benefit they provide to you. They can only charge you for their cost. One important caveat here. I have used gross margin in this video as an easily accessible estimate. To be accurate, I should have used a return on capital metric like return on capital employed, ROCE, or return on invested capital, ROIC, or gross margin on invested capital, GMOIC. But I did not want to call this law the iron law of ROCE or ROIC or GMOIC because these metrics are not easy to understand for most people. The reason ROCE, ROIC and GMOIC are better measures than gross margin has to do with how direct and indirect costs are accounted. For example, there are businesses in perfect competition like some luxury goods retailers where the business may report a high gross margin despite being in perfect competition. This is because costs like rent and marketing would be accounted as indirect costs. But truly, such a business cannot generate its revenue without expensive rent and marketing. So these costs should ideally be accounted as direct costs instead. On the other side, businesses with strong defensibility may also report low gross margins if they account their gross merchandise value as revenue, for example. These kinds of accounting shenanigans are more difficult with ROCE and ROIC. So companies in perfect competition find it tough to report high ROCE or ROIC even if they can report high gross margins. And companies that have defensibility will report high ROCE and ROIC even if they report low gross margins. So the iron law of gross margins is a good enough foundation to understand the world at a belief system level. You should build your own caveats on top of this law as you learn more about the world and find more edge cases. With that said, let's move on to the final reason why VCs love the SaaS game: infinite scalability. Hey there, I'm KJ Saxena, founder of Relentless VC. The video you just watched is part of the venture capital and entrepreneurship specialization, which is available absolutely for free on relentless.ventures. Go check it out. If you're a tech startup founder and want to raise money from us, you should apply on our website. Lastly, if you like this video, do subscribe and share it with your friends.